Halfway to home. Welcome to the Poetry Unit. As a poet myself, I've lived for this part of the course. I have 80 million things I want us to do with this unit, and so very little time to do them. Our problem is not creative exploration, it's the time to do it. Such is life. Say es la vie. William Wordsworth said that poetry is the spontaneous overflow of powerful feeling. His definition still makes its way into the opening lectures of most poetry classes. One of my favorite definitions of poetry comes from poet Allen Ginsberg of Howl fame. Poetry is not an expression of the party line. It's that time of night, lying in bed, thinking what you really think, making the private world public. That's what the poet does. Poetry to me is prayer in the purest sense of the word. It takes observations and feelings and makes something out of them. It explains me to myself. And when it does what I most wanted to do, it reaches someone else. Poetry does a small thing in a big way. It's one idea, one narrative, one thing, but it can have far reaching consequences. Given that we can't do everything in 8 weeks, I'm going to try something a little different each week to introduce you to different forms, hybrid forms, different poets, the craft of writing, verse that sings. We'll use discussion boards to look at specifics of craft. I'm not going to do the New Yorker podcast this unit, although I highly recommend it. I get bored easily, and we did a lot of podcasts in the fiction unit. Plus, the podcast focuses only on 2 poems, and I'd like to stretch our ability to touch more than that. If you find yourself needing to explore modern masters, take a look at the podcast. I'm also wanting us to explore spoken word and slam, as I don't think they get enough love. Look for discussion boards to go off in those directions. Your goal in this unit is to create and revise 8 to 15 pages of poetry for your final portfolio by the end of this semester. With weekly writing assignments, you should have more than enough and should be able to choose the pieces you admire most for your portfolio. I've chosen Kim Adenisio's book, Ordinary Genius, to guide our discussion. I was fortunate enough to take a class with Adenisio 3 or 4 years ago, and I've been a fan of her approach to writing since. The book is not a boring read. It jumps right into and shines a flashlight in the crevices where each of us hides her words. While it offers plenty of prompts and gives specifics for how to create, it also pats our shoulders and assures us we can. I like that. A poem, even more than the short story, often begins way rough and requires a playful attention to the words and arrangement of them to make it good. Adenisio helps us find that play. I think you will really enjoy this book, and I hope it will stimulate your imagination and creative instincts this semester and for years to come. The first 5 chapters are a quick read. Dive into them, and as Adenisio says, stop, sit still for a moment, experience your own awareness. Then you'll be ready to write. Here's what I recommend for poetry writing. Get yourself a new notebook and make a time every day to go somewhere quiet and observe and describe and journal for at least 20 minutes. Maybe these observations will immediately jump into verse, or maybe you'll have to smelt the words and then smith them into lines. I have a 2-part process. Almost always my poems begin handwritten in my journal. That's one kind of brain process. Then I start a new computer file where I redraft and attempt to craft what I have handwritten. That's a different brain connection. Rinse and repeat until the poem finds its life and takes on the voice and shape that you want. I find that repetition of handwriting and revising takes me surprising places. I had a poem published last week in the San Antonio Review that began with one of the writing assignments we'll be using this semester. My poetry workshop last spring focused on medicine and mortality, terribly ironic given the pandemic. And all my work had to touch on some aspect of the subject. I struggled with an eating disorder for the better part of 30 years and had never written about it. This class gave me permission to explore that time, and I learned a lot in this process of exploration, craft, revision, revision, revision. I'm pleased with where the poem ended, and I have a very different piece on the same subject coming out in the same journal in November. Who knew the San Antonio Review had such interest in these dark subjects? Our writing assignment this week will tackle the first of two forms and the American hybrid of them: haiku, tanka, and the American sentence. You'll see links posted on this week's class page with more information about them. If you find other sites that fit with what we're writing, send them to me and I'll post them for everyone to share. Besides learning some good things about the craft of poetry, I want you to have fun and love the process. If I can share anything with you about writing, it's a love of something that's so mysterious, so beautiful, so sharp and powerful in such a short space. So go make your words count and have a wonderful time doing it.